They say time heals all wounds, but what if time only makes them fester? What if the secret you've carried for over a decade becomes the very poison that rots your family from the inside out? For 10 years, I carried my mother's darkest secret, a secret that shattered my father, disgusted my siblings, and hollowed me out night after night. When I finally broke, when I finally exposed her betrayal, I thought I was saving us. Instead, I lost everything. Before I tell you how one phone call destroyed my family and changed my life forever, don't forget to subscribe for more true stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice. Every story here is proof that no secret stays buried forever. I was 12 when my life first cracked open. 12 years old when I walked into the kitchen and heard my father's voice raised louder than I'd ever heard it before. His words were clipped, sharp, like knives being thrown. And my mother? She wasn't even crying. She wasn't pleading. She stood there with her arms crossed like she'd been caught stealing cookies, not sleeping with another man. That man was Bruce. Back then, his name didn't mean much to me. He was just some shadow, a whisper, a storm cloud that lingered over every dinner conversation until it finally ripped our family apart. My dad left. He didn't slam the door or pack his things in a rage. He just left, shoulders heavy, face pale, as if the love of his life had been slowly graining him dry for years and he finally collapsed. After that night, the house felt wrong. Walls seemed thinner, rooms colder. And my mother? She doubled down. She clung to Bruce like he was some great prize, parading him in front of us like a trophy, despite knowing exactly what he was, someone else's husband. She told us not to tell anyone, not Dad, not our relatives, not friends at school. It became the unspoken rule, the heavy silence sitting at every meal. We were kids, and suddenly we were tasked with protecting her lies. I remember the first time Bruce came over officially. My stomach knotted just seeing him. He wasn't ugly in the traditional sense, but there was something off. Something about the way his eyes lingered too long, the way his smiles stretched wide but never reached his eyes. My siblings, 2 brothers and a sister, looked at him the same way. None of us liked him. We didn't even try. But Mom insisted. "Bruce is family now," she said one Sunday, her voice clipped, daring us to argue. I wanted to scream. Family? He had a wife. He had children. He wasn't ours. He was a parasite. Over the years, Bruce became a fixture. Birthdays, holidays, school events, he was always lurking, as though trying to cement his place in our lives. He'd give me fake smiles and pretend interest in my grades, but it never fooled me. Behind his polite mask, there was a smugness, a silent arrogance, like he knew he'd won, like he believed he could take whatever he wanted and no one would ever stop him. The worst part wasn't even him. It was my mother. She defended him with a fierceness she'd never shown for her own children. Whenever one of us dared to mention Dad or ask if Bruce was really permanent, she'd snap. Her voice would rise, her face would twist, and she'd hurl guilt at us until we fell silent. I learned early that the truth had no place in our house. Still, I couldn't help myself. I grew obsessed. While my friends in high school were gossiping about crushes or homework, I was scrolling through social media, hunting for traces of Bruce's real life, his wife, his family, his lies. Her name, his wife's name, was Margaret. I found her Facebook one night, buried under layers of privacy, but open enough for me to piece things together. She posted family photos, anniversaries, vacations, smiling children who looked nothing like the monster sitting at my mother's table. And there he was, Bruce, grinning like the devoted husband, holding Margaret's hand on the beach, cutting cakes at family parties, writing comments like, "Wouldn't want to spend my life with anyone else." Each picture made me feel sick. How could he live two lives so easily? How could my mother accept being his dirty secret? Worse, how could she drag us into it, force us to carry her shame while he lived free of consequence? I tried to push it down, to study, to graduate, to live like other kids. But it never left me. The anger simmered, slow and steady. Some nights I'd lie awake, listening to the creaks of our house, imagining Bruce sneaking into Margaret's bed after leaving ours. I'd picture Margaret smiling at him, trusting him, never realizing she was sharing him with my mother. And every time, my chest burned hotter. By my early 20s, I'd become the unofficial keeper of the secret. My siblings avoided the topic, pretending if they ignored Bruce long enough, maybe he'd vanish. But he never did. Year after year, he tightened his grip, and my mother only grew more smug, more blind. She'd tell us, "Bruce is leaving her soon, just wait." She said it in 2012, in 2015, in 2019. Always the same promise, always empty. It wasn't just the waiting. It was the way she acted like we should root for it, like we should cheer for Bruce to blow up another family so he could finally be ours. But he already was ours, in the worst way possible. I thought I could endure it, that maybe one day Bruce would slip up on his own and Margaret would find out, that I wouldn't have to be the one to do it. But the longer it dragged on, the more it ate at me. By the 10th year, I wasn't just angry, I was exhausted. Exhausted from biting my tongue, exhausted from pretending Bruce was normal, exhausted from shielding my mother's reputation while she openly trampled over everyone else's. The breaking point came quietly. No dramatic fight, no sudden revelation. Just one night, scrolling Margaret's profile again, seeing another smiling post about her wonderful husband on their 30th anniversary. 30 years, 3 decades of trust and devotion, poisoned by my mother and Bruce. I stared at that post for hours. My fingers trembled. My heart pounded. And finally, I whispered out loud, to no one, "She deserves to know." That was the night I decided. I didn't plan some elaborate scheme. I didn't draw charts or set alarms. I just acted. I found a few of Margaret's friends and coworkers online. I drafted an email, anonymous, blunt, but careful, and I sent it. My heart raced so hard I thought it might burst. My hands shook as if I'd committed a crime. For days, silence. I almost convinced myself I'd been ignored, that maybe no one believed me. Then, an email. Not from a friend, not from a coworker, from Margaret herself. She wanted to talk. I knew the moment I read her words that everything was about to change. And I was right. I dialed her number with trembling hands, knowing once I heard her voice, there'd be no going back. I wasn't just exposing Bruce. I was detonating a bomb that had been ticking for 10 years. The phone rang only once before she picked up. "Hello?" Her voice was softer than I expected. Tired, kind, but with a nervous edge. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. For a moment, I almost hung up. But then I remembered her smile in those anniversary photos. The smile built on lies, and I forced myself to speak. "Margaret, this is the person who emailed you." There was a pause. I could hear the faint hum of her house behind her. Then, quietly, "Thank you for reaching out. Please tell me everything." And so I did. What was meant to be a quick call turned into nearly 3 hours of unraveling a decade of filth. My voice shook as I told her about the affair, how it started, how my father left because of it, how Bruce had sat at our tables, eaten our food, smiled at us while living a double life. She didn't scream. She didn't lash out. She listened. She asked questions in a trembling voice, every detail another dagger driven into her chest. 10 years? She whispered at one point. He's been with your mother for 10 years? Yes, I whispered back. And he promised her he'd leave you every year, but he never did. The silence that followed was deafening. Then I heard it. The sound that will haunt me forever. She cried. Not the soft sob of someone hurt, but the deep, guttural cry of someone whose entire world has been torn in two. I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, feeling my own tears sting. I'm so sorry, I choked out. You don't deserve this. None of this is your fault. Her voice broke between sobs. Thank you. Thank you for telling me. I would have never known. I thought we were happy. I closed my eyes, the weight of it pressing down. In that moment, I knew two things with absolute certainty. One, that Margaret was innocent and kind. And two, that my relationship with my mother was over. I didn't say it out loud, but I knew. There was no way she wouldn't find out it was me. The details I knew, the timeline, it would all point back to me. And yet, I couldn't stop. I answered every one of Margaret's questions, no matter how painful. When the call finally ended, she thanked me over and over, promising she'd get her finances in order, then leave Bruce. For the first time in years, I felt light. Not happy, never happy, but lighter, as though I'd cut out the tumor that had been growing inside me for a decade. But relief doesn't last long when you're standing at the edge of a cliff. The fallout came fast. The next morning, my phone was eerily quiet. No texts from my mom, no good morning messages from my siblings. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just coincidence. But then noon came and still nothing. By evening, I tried calling my mother, straight to voicemail. Something in my stomach dropped. Over the next 24 hours, the silence spread like wildfire. My siblings stopped answering me. My mother blocked me on every platform. Relatives who had always sent casual check-ins suddenly vanished. It was like I'd been erased. Then came the messages. Not from her, of course. My mother never faced me directly. Instead, cousins, uncles, even my siblings sent texts filled with venom. Words like traitor, disgusting. How could you do this to your own mother? One message still rings in my head. You're dead to us. You chose a stranger over your own blood. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling. They didn't know the truth. Or maybe they didn't care. My mother had twisted the story, painted herself the victim, and me the villain. Every ding of my phone was another cut. Every accusation another reminder that I had detonated the bomb and was now standing in the blast radius alone. I thought my siblings might stand by me. We'd all hated Bruce. We'd whispered about how awful he was, how we wished Mom would leave him. But when push came to shove, they folded. They chose her. They chose the easier lie over the harder truth. The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. Nights blurred into one another as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd become the outcast in my own family. I told myself over and over, I did the right thing. Margaret deserved to know. But the loneliness, it was suffocating. And worse, Mom and Bruce thrived. Word spread quickly. They were engaged. Engaged. After 10 years of lies, after destroying 2 families, they were going to stand in front of people and promise forever. I wanted to vomit. Every announcement felt like a slap in the face. Photos of the 2 of them together, smiling, celebrating, my mother basking in the glow of support from the very family who had abandoned me. Not one of them knew or wanted to know the full truth. It was like living in a nightmare. Some days, regret crushed me. I replayed the phone call with Margaret, wondering if I should have kept my mouth shut.
Maybe Bruce would have slipped eventually. Maybe someone else would have told her. And maybe, just maybe, I'd still have a family. But then I'd remember her cries, the way her voice broke when she realized her life was a lie. And I'd remind myself I did the right thing, even if it ruined me. Still, knowing you're right doesn't make the silence easier. It doesn't fill the empty holidays, the birthdays no one invites you to, the messages left unread. Bruce stole more than my father, more than my mother's dignity. He stole my family. And in the pit of my despair, a thought began to form. If telling the truth destroyed me, then maybe it was time to stop playing fair. Maybe it was time to turn their own game against them. I had taken the first shot by exposing the affair, but now I wanted something else, something colder. Revenge. Because if Bruce thought he could slither his way into my family and erase me, he was about to learn just how dangerous an outcast can be.
The weeks after my exile were the darkest of my life. I'd wake up, roll over, and instinctively check my phone. Still nothing. No "how are you" from my siblings. No birthday reminders from mom. Not even the petty arguments we used to have. The silence was heavier than words. But grief, I learned, has stages. And once the shock and despair settled, something else began to burn through me. Anger. Anger at my mother for protecting Bruce more than her own children. Anger at Bruce for poisoning every corner of our lives. Anger at my siblings for folding like paper when it mattered most. And most of all, anger at myself for thinking that telling the truth would magically fix things. For believing, even for a second, that doing the right thing would be rewarded. No, I had been punished for it, cast out. And now, I realized, if I was already the villain in their story, maybe it was time to play the role. I didn't want a childish revenge. No slashed tires, no screaming at family dinners. I wanted something that would cut deeper. Something that would unravel Bruce and my mother the way they had unraveled me. So, I started digging. The first place I went was Bruce's digital footprint. 10 years of lurking on his wife's socials had taught me one thing. He was careless. He loved to show off his job, his travel, his connections. A quick search of his LinkedIn, his work contacts, even old news articles about his company painted a picture of a man who thrived on reputation. His career wasn't just a job, it was his identity. And identity is fragile. I remembered snippets from my mother, little things she'd let slip over the years. Trips that didn't line up, business expenses that sounded suspicious, times when Bruce would go work late, but mom would get flowers the next day. It all sounded like more than cheating. It sounded like someone playing fast and loose with money that wasn't his. I started a notebook. Every odd story, every suspicious timeline, every inconsistency I could recall. I cross-checked them with his public posts, company announcements, even tagged photos from coworkers. Piece by piece, a pattern emerged. Bruce wasn't just cheating in his marriage, he was cheating everywhere. Cooking books, lying about hours, exploiting travel perks. And the best part? He was sloppy enough that I didn't even need insider access to spot it. The trail was right there for anyone willing to connect the dots. But here's the thing, I wasn't reckless anymore. I had already detonated one bomb by telling Margaret. This time, I wanted precision. So, I waited. Weeks, then months. I let the family stew in their narrative of me as the outcast, the traitor. I let my mother and Bruce parade their engagement, posting sickly sweet photos for all to see. Every time I saw them smile, I reminded myself, patience. Because revenge isn't about speed, it's about impact. One evening, sitting alone at my desk, I opened a blank document. At the top, I typed in bold, "The Bruce File." Then,
I began writing. Dates, places, suspicious transactions, stories my mother had let slip, like the time Bruce claimed to be on a work trip in Chicago, but I'd seen him in town picking her up in his car. Every discrepancy, every shady timeline, every scrap of proof. I cross-referenced it with public company records. I highlighted the overlaps that looked like misuse of funds. And when I was finished, I had a neat 20-page dossier that painted a damning picture of Bruce not just as an adulterer, but as a man living far beyond what his salary should allow. Was it absolute proof? No. But was it enough to raise eyebrows in the right places? Absolutely. The thrill of it was intoxicating. For the first time in years, I didn't feel powerless. I felt sharp, dangerous, like I finally had a weapon of my own. Still, part of me hesitated. Revenge, once unleashed, can't be undone. If I pulled this trigger, there'd be no going back. I wrestled with it for weeks. At night, I'd stare at the ceiling, hearing Margaret's sobs replay in my mind, reminding myself why I started all this. She deserved to know. And maybe, just maybe, the world deserved to know who Bruce really was. The breaking point came at their engagement party. No, I wasn't invited. Of course not. But photos made their way to me. Anyway. Through relatives, through social media, through people who still followed me quietly despite my mother's narrative. There they were, Bruce and my mother, standing under fairy lights, holding champagne, smiling like they hadn't destroyed lives to get there. My siblings surrounded them, clapping, hugging, all beaming like this was the love story of the century. I stared at those photos until my vision blurred. My chest ached so badly it felt like a weight was sitting on me. And then calm washed over me, the kind of calm that only comes after rage burns itself out. That night, I opened my email, attached the Bruce file, and drafted a short, professional-sounding note. To whom it concerns, I believe your company may be unaware of certain financial discrepancies related to Bruce Bray. Please see attached for details. Signed, a concerned party. No threats, no theatrics, just facts. I sent it to their HR, to their compliance department, to a couple of board members I found through public filings. Then I sat back, closed my laptop, and waited. For days, nothing. The silence gnawed at me. Had I made a mistake? Was I just paranoid? Was I about to look like a fool? Then, the first ripple hit. Bruce's LinkedIn went quiet. His bragging posts stopped. My mother stopped posting photos. And whispers, tiny, delicious whispers, began trickling through extended relatives. Something about Bruce having issues at work. I tried not to smile, tried not to let the satisfaction show, even though no one was watching. Because this was just the beginning. What started as a quiet email was about to snowball into the one thing Bruce had always feared most, losing control of the perfect image he'd built, and I was the one who lit the match.
When you set a trap, the hardest part is waiting for it to snap shut. For weeks, I forced myself into silence. I didn't prod, didn't ask questions, didn't let curiosity betray me. But behind the scenes, I could feel the cracks forming. At first, it was subtle. My mother's social media, usually a flood of Bruce this, Bruce that, went eerily quiet. No photos, no smiling updates, no countdowns to their wedding. Just silence. Then, the whispers grew louder. A cousin texted me, careful, almost guilty, asking if I'd heard what happened. I played dumb. And that's when she spilled. Bruce had been put on leave. Something about financial irregularities. I could almost hear the trap spring shut. I pictured him sitting in some sterile conference room, HR across from him, that smug grin finally cracking as they slid papers across the table. The dossier I'd sent wasn't bulletproof, but it was enough to trigger an investigation.
enough to shine a light in the shadows where he'd thrived. And Bruce? He wasn't built for the light. The fallout was quick. Within a month, his name disappeared from the company website. Resigned for personal reasons, the official statement said. But I knew better. Resignation wasn't a choice. It was a surrender. My mother tried to spin it, of course. He's just taking time off, she told relatives. He's focusing on us. But the strain showed. Her posts grew defensive, brittle, and soon the family whispers shifted from admiration to pity. The engagement stalled. Wedding plans vanished. Suddenly, the fairy tale romance didn't look so shiny when the prince had no crown to wear. And my siblings? They stayed quiet. No more gloating messages, no more smug photos of family dinners with Bruce at the head of the table. They weren't ready to admit I'd been right, but their silence spoke volumes. For the first time in years, I felt vindicated. Not happy. This wasn't happiness. It was darker, colder. But it was satisfaction. Still, revenge is never clean. I'd hoped, maybe foolishly, that my mother would see the truth once Bruce's mask slipped. That she'd realize the man she'd burned her family for was nothing but a fraud. That maybe, just maybe, she'd reach out. But she didn't. If anything, she dug deeper. Blamed the company, blamed Margaret, blamed the world. Never him. Never herself. And me? I remained the villain in her story, the traitor, the child who betrayed her. The difference now was, I didn't care. Because while she clung to her ruined prince, Margaret was free. I later heard through quiet channels that she filed for divorce, took her finances, and walked away. 30 years of lies cut loose in one brutal slice. I still remember her voice on that phone call, the way it broke when she realized the truth. And now, I like to think her voice is stronger, clearer. She's free. That's the part no one can take from me. My revenge didn't fix my family. It didn't bring my siblings back or erase the years of silence, but it exposed Bruce. It cracked his image. It gave Margaret the truth she deserved. And sometimes, that has to be enough. Because revenge isn't about getting everything back. It's about making sure that people who hurt you never walk away clean. As for me, I carry scars. I carry loneliness. But I also carry the knowledge that I didn't stay silent, that I didn't let him win. And if that makes me the villain in their story, so be it. At least in mine, I was the one who fought back. So what do you do when telling the truth ruins you? When your family chooses a lie over your loyalty? For me, the answer was simple. You stop begging for their approval. You stop waiting for them to see reason. And you take back control in the only way left, by making sure the people who broke you can never hide behind their masks again. Justice doesn't always look like a happy ending. Sometimes it looks like watching a man lose everything he thought he'd built. Sometimes it looks like silence, because silence means they're finally afraid. If you felt that, if you've ever been the outcast for telling the truth, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories where secrets get exposed and liars finally face the fallout. And tell me in the comments, would you have done what I did? Or would you have stayed silent? Because sometimes, silence isn't golden. Sometimes, it's betrayal.